Hey everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is actually the first video in which you can also see my face. So it's a bit awkward for myself. I hope it doesn't scare or frighten or distract you in any way. So yeah, since we've gotten that out of the way, we can begin with the video. This video I'm going to discuss Arthur Schopenhauer again. I'm mainly focused on his book The World as Will and ID. So after seeing my previous video on Schopenhauer, you may have concluded that Arthur Schopenhauer's philosophy was not the most encouraging. So Schopenhauer believed that the world exists only as an idea within our brains, and that all that we do in the world, together with all the other organisms, is fueled by an unsatisfiable will. And this will, according to Schopenhauer, is unsatisfiable because a wish or a desire, once fulfilled, will quickly result in a new wish or desire. And Schopenhauer observed that happiness is characterized by the speed and frequency in which the circle is completed and restarted again. So he wrote that we consider ourselves fairly fortunate if there is still something to wish for and to strive after, to keep up the game whereby desire constantly passes into satisfaction and satisfaction into new desire. If the pace of this is swift, it is called happiness, and if it's slow, sorrow, and does not falter and come to the standstill, that shows in dreadful, stultifying boredom, in lifeless yearning without a definite object, a deadening languor. So as a result, as long as we remain subject to this will, we find ourselves in a constant struggle. We can, however, end the struggle, according to Schopenhauer, by freeing ourselves from will. So he wrote, in individual people, knowledge can elude the servitude, throw off its yoke, and free from all the will's purposes, exist purely for itself, simply as a clear mirror of the world. So, at the end of my previous video, I promised to explain how we could free ourselves from this will in a future video, and yeah, this is this future video in which I will be discussing exactly that, how we can transcend our will according to Arthur Schopenhauer, and thereby also alleviate our suffering. So, Arthur Schopenhauer believed that art was one of the best ways to illustrate our struggle with will. Art can, at least for a moment, pause our will. And this is the case because, according to Schopenhauer, art is unique. Unlike other productions or activities of us humans, art can actually reach its final goal, and therefore it ceases to will. So science, for example, is always moving towards something. It can never be completed, and it can therefore never satisfy us. However, art can actually reach its goal, and it can therefore also satisfy us. So Schopenhauer wrote, science, following the ceaseless and inconstant stream of the fourfold forms of reason and consequence, is with each goal it attains bidden to go further and can never reach a final goal, nor attain full satisfaction. Art, on the contrary, is everywhere at its goal. So art achieves its goal by removing an object from its context and presenting it to us simply how it is. In the words of Schopenhauer, it plucks the object of its contemplation out of the stream of the world's course and holds it isolated before it. And as a result, according to Schopenhauer, the object presented in art represents something much grander. It presents an object free from all relations, free from will. He wrote, this particular thing, which in that stream was a minute part, becomes for art a representative of the whole, an equivalent of the endless multitude in space and time. So art pauses at this particular thing, it stops the wheel of time. For art, the relations vanish. Only the essential, the idea, is its object. And to illustrate this, Arthur Schopenhauer used the Dutch painters of so-called still lifes as an example. And these artists could make a painting of a seemingly uninteresting object extremely significant because they kind of placed this object above everything else. Schopenhauer wrote, "Inward disposition, the predominance of knowing over willing, can produce the state under any circumstances. This is shown by those admirable Dutch artists who directed this purely objective perception to the most insignificant object, and established a lasting monument to their objectivity and spiritual peace in their pictures of still life." So, sadly, we cannot continuously immerse ourselves in art. However, Schopenhauer observed that it might be worthwhile to actually look at the world in a similar way as how we look at art. That is, look at something without our will defining what it is that we see. And Schopenhauer indicated that we mostly go through our lives paying attention to how the things that we see relate to our will. He wrote, "He can turn his attention to things only insofar as they have some relation to his will, however indirect it may be. And as a result, it is difficult for us to enjoy life as it unfolds before us, because we only pay attention to the things for as long as they can provide satisfaction to our will, i.e. for as long as they are useful to us." Schopenhauer wrote, "In all that is presented to him, he looks quickly, as the lazy man looks for a chair, merely for the concept under which it is to be brought, and then it interests him no further." As a consequence, Schopenhauer argued that it is difficult to genuinely enjoy something. This is why he is so soon done with everything, with works of art, natural beauty, and with life's spectacle from one scene to the next. Truly meaningful as this always is, he does not linger, he seeks only his own way in life. However, if we can manage to change the way in which we view the world, we might be able, according to Schopenhauer, to also escape our ceaseless will. He wrote, "When some external cause or inward disposition lifts us suddenly out of the endless stream of willing and snatches knowledge from the slavery of will, the attention is no longer directed to the motives of willing, but comprehends things free from their relation to will." And if we do so, we can then observe everything that is happening around us without any regard to our personal interests. Therefore, according to Schopenhauer, we can move about in the world without being subject to will. He wrote, "Thus it observes them without personal interest, without subjectivity, purely objectively, and it surrenders to them insofar as they are merely ideas, but not insofar as they are motives. Then all at once the peace which we were always seeking, but which on the former path of the desires always eluded us, comes to us of its own accord, and we experience a sense of well-being." So in a sense, we would then merely be a spectator of the world, and we would judge all the events that are occurring around us or within us as an objective spectator. Schopenhauer wrote, "This liberation of our knowing lifts us as wholly and entirely away from all that, as do sleep and dreams. Happiness and unhappiness have disappeared. We are no longer individual. The individual is forgotten. We are only pure subject of knowledge. We are only that one eye of the world which looks out from all knowing creatures, but which in man alone can become perfectly free from our servitude to will." As a result, it does not really matter whether one is rich or poor, or it's really of no difference to the spectator. So Schopenhauer wrote, "Thus all difference of individuality so entirely disappears that it is all the same whether the perceiving eye belongs to a mighty king or a wretched beggar. For neither joy nor grieving is carried with us beyond that boundary." Arthur Schopenhauer made another interesting suggestion. He suggested his readers to view the present as we view the past. So according to Schopenhauer, when we consider the past, we only consider the objective reality of the past, and we kind of forget about the subjective realities of the past. And as a result, it is often the case that past situations appear better than our present realities. This might, however, be false according to Schopenhauer, because when we perceive our present realities, our subjective experiences influence our perception. So he wrote that when we are more than ordinarily disturbed by some want, the remembrance of past and distant scenes suddenly flits across our minds like a lost paradise. The imagination recalls only what was objective, not what was individually subjective. If we can manage to focus on the objective in the present just as much as when we contemplate the past, we can relieve ourselves from a lot of suffering according to Schopenhauer. He wrote, "We can deliver ourselves from all suffering just as well through present objects as through distant ones as soon as we raise ourselves to a purely objective contemplation of them, and so are able to bring about the illusion that only the objects are present and not we ourselves." So yeah, that might be a bit complicated, but it already brings us to the conclusion. So according to Schopenhauer, we mostly go through our lives looking at all the objects in the world only in relation to our will. So we look at how far these objects can satisfy our will. And this is problematic because it results in a constant struggle. Schopenhauer believed that we could end the struggle by viewing the objects in the world, well, just as they are, without any interference from will. And he illustrated this by his example of art, and he argued that we must therefore look at the world and our own lives as a piece of art, of which we are the objective spectator. And, well, I think that doing so might appear at first rather submissive, as if we should simply accept our fate as it is. However, I think it's interesting to note as well that Schopenhauer was heavily influenced by Eastern writings, such as the Upanishads, which I have here as well. In the Upanishads it was written that concealed in the heart of all beings is the Atman, the spirit, the self, smaller than the smallest atom, greater than the vast spaces. The man who surrenders his human will leaves sorrow behind and beholds the glory of the Atman by the grave of the Creator. And I think if we can consider Arthur Schopenhauer's philosophy in relation to these Eastern ideas and religions, we might see that his solution to our ceaseless struggle with will is not a submission but more of a relaxation. I quote Schopenhauer, "Thus it is that everyone can say, 'I am, once and for all, Lord of the present, and through all eternity it will accompany me as my shadow. Accordingly, I do not wonder where the present has come from and how it happens to be taking place precisely at this time.'" So yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. Please let me know what you think about it in the comments. If you have any suggestions, please let me know as well. Also let me know what you think about this idea of Schopenhauer in general. So thank you, and I hope to see you again.